wicked. Brrr. It's brrr. I love that sound. My favorite sound. Every time before I record or while I'm recording a verse in the booth and when I'm making music, that's like my trademark. It's wicked. Brrr. And anytime I hit record on something, it's usually what I'd be saying. It's I don't know if you've ever heard much Jamaican music or dancehall music, but it's like oftentimes you'll hear the person who's about to touch the mic has their trademark. You know it's them.
Lulu has landed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's all happening. You've been through a bunch of stuff lately. What's it like you said? Yeah. The traversing of the lands and the internal lands, the landscapes internally, externally, with the physical, geographical movement around the place. And ever since I've known you, actually, you've been quite a mover. You've always been here, there. I spot you in like the most random spots.
I am a mover at heart. Yeah, I think that's a good summary, whether it's moving around the globe or moving in a body or moving emotion. Yeah, I think that's a pretty apt description.
All the movement is happening. And tell us about some of the movement that's been happening lately for you.
Well, I think what prompted this conversation between us, in part, one of the things was I had an old injury crop up. And so I do have a background in movement and work with others in movement. And so I had this humbling experience of finding that my body was kind of locked up and I wasn't moving in the way I'm used to.
A little bit immobile.
I got a bit immobile. And so that's been one of the explorations with movement lately is what is my body speaking to me, even in the discomfort and the pain that arises, and how does my body speak what I maybe haven't managed to acknowledge to myself in my conscious mind. So pain is a messenger, I guess. Has been one of the landscapes I've been traversing, and that shifts, of course. But it's something that I'm really passionate about in my work with others as well. I think that, we are faced with and flooded with a lot of images, whether it's via commercial media or social media, of people who are seemingly always in flow and in these perfect bodies. And if we're not there, we can feel like we're somehow wrong and faulty and broken at this deep core level. And so I guess part of my passion in my work and my life is about doing what I can to meet that with love and patience, so that I'm not running from it or trying to numb it, but learning from it and then moving through it.
And what do you do when you are immobile and you can't actually move? What's your strategy there?
Yeah. Well, when are we ever truly immobile? Number one. But to answer your question, I mean, for me, a couple of years back, I had quite a full-on little experience in terms of my health. And during that period, I asked myself, like, what is my medicine?
What do you care to go into what it was? Or?
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to. So at that time, and I guess it relates to the question you asked at the start of our conversation, I had just left Canada, which was a place that I felt very much at home in, and it still feels like a home for me, and had been seeking to make a life there. And my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And for a while, I just kind of bounced back and forth. And then it got to a point where I'm an only child. I realized, okay, it's time to go home, and it's time to be with my dad as he dies. And, there was a big part of me that did not want to go back. It was like the little kid in me was having a little tantrum, not wanting to, in inverted commas, give up my life to go back and be with my dad. And I love my dad, even though we challenged each other, like is often the case with parent-child. So I headed back, and it was a pretty tough time. And I would say that I had up until that point in my life, I've led a really charmed life. And I don't think I'd ever really had to dig deep. I'd never really reached that breaking point. And that's what that experience offered me. And it wasn't offering, like, how can any of us possibly meet others in our lives with compassion if we've never experienced something like that? So I was pretty darn stressed, and I guess grieving in a lot of ways. And so during that period, while my dad was still, journeying toward his death, I started to experience some major illnesses, which for me, I guess you could call it adrenal fatigue, whatever that blanket term might be. For me, that showed up in all sorts of ways in my body. So digestion, my back went out. I stopped menstruating for 1.5 years as a woman.
Whoa.
That brought up its own grief.
What was that like? What was that like I imagine like the first couple of months, you're like, hang on a sec, what's like, and then.
Well, that's a whole nother story, which we might go into along the way. But my journey.
We'll park that one there for a moment.
Yeah, park that one there. But yeah, it brought up a grief, almost like almost like a feeling of, this grief for not bleeding monthly.
I'm kind of like want to go into that. I'm reminding myself to park it over there. I'm like, oh, it's just so much unraveling as you start talking to me about that. But yeah, we'll park it in.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to. It's very, very close to my heart, that story. So yeah, system meltdown on a lot of levels. But yeah, it was a real gift for me. Yeah, and my ability to sit in a space like that. And through that, I became really passionate with, a passion for healing and alternative therapies and other ways of looking at our health and our place in nature and our capacity to heal. Like, it was just it stoked the fire in me, that whole experience. And so I'm really passionate about spreading messages that make people feel okay to not be perfect, because, we're all human, and that's part of our learning journey here. And there's actually great joy and great love and like awe and wonder that unfolds in our willingness and having the courage to move with that.
And what was the perfection piece for you? Like, because that's something that I guess has been a little bit journey of mine, especially bodily, like I'm heavily movement based. I've always, since I was young, since I can remember, I've been running around, throwing balls, hitting balls, like flipping around, doing acrobatics, climbing stuff. Just physicality is huge for me as well. That movement, I can totally relate to it. And in like exercise, I got into young age, and qigong movement, stuff like this, martial arts. And the physical body for me, I've had what do you call this kind of dysmorphic kind of mental image, like what I see in the mirror is totally not what is in actuality.
Wow.
And so like that idea of perfection, and looking at all this, the magazines with the weightlifters and all of this kind of deal, it has this idea. It's like you said, media is giving us, and nowadays it's crazy with the social media, with the perfect lives, as you mentioned, and having that comparative thing, and like looking myself and not necessarily knowing what was happening, but feeling like a not good enough, or not perfect enough, or not like that, or like outsourcing my image or my identity, my self-image, to something else. And I'm curious to know what it was like for you, you know, with those ideas like of that perfection, or like where did that come from? Where it didn't just born, where was it born from for you to be interested in it and be excited about sharing, like that it's okay to be imperfect and such?
Yeah. And thank you for that perspective too. Like, I think it's really valuable to hear that from a man as well, because I think that can get lost sometimes, maybe particularly amongst women when they're chatting like, oh, there's so much pressure for us. I think it's beautiful that that be acknowledged as a challenge that exists for men in our day and age as well.
Yeah, well, that's like one of the big ones in particular. I don't know if you know, but a couple of my good friends, my best mate, Dan, he also suffered from like bulimia and also this body dysmorphic stuff, and always working on the body, always fit, strong, but always never feeling good enough about it. You know, like in his mind, he was so small and scrawny, but in reality, he was just like shredded. You know, and same, like similar with my baby brother, but they both committed suicide is my point. And they both had to the point where this, you know, this stuff that, like my brother, not necessarily more so with the body stuff, but always fixated on the body and that, but also you know, that becoming like, you know, kind of unbalanced or imbalance, where it's like, yeah, just put so imbalanced that then like life gives depression and anxiety and all these other things that trying to balance you out and come back into balance. So like you said, it's not, definitely not, I don't know if it's what the stats are, but I don't hear too much about many young women killing themselves to the point of, you know, like suicide around this kind of stuff, or the depression and stuff. So it's definitely a conversation that isn't necessarily talked about that much. Or it's like, you know, we definitely hear a lot about the pressures that young women face or women face to fit into a particular mold or variety that is deemed attractive or deemed good enough or sexy.
Totally. Yeah.
So
yeah, for me, look, where did it arise from? To go back to your question, you know, we grow up in this soup, which is how it's always been, you know, and I think until each of us, like I love what you said, like outsourcing your self-identity, until we each go through whatever our journey looks like of discovering what's the essence of me beyond any shape or form, like feeling that energy and that essence pulse through me, like until I tap into that, it's hard to like, and even once I've tapped into it, like returning to that when we have so much around us. It's like
what
you need to look like this to be loved. You need to look like this to have a boyfriend. You need to look like this to retain the boyfriend. You need, whatever it might be, or to be a successful businesswoman. Like you have to dress like this, or like, whoa.
Hold up.
Yeah, exactly. And oddly enough, for me, so that, and I still have to manage that in my mind, like that seeking for perfection at the physical level. And even when it's seemingly not there, like even when I might think that I don't look how I should, or that I can't move how I might want to, the feeling of wholeness is always there. If I go beyond the definition of what that is or should look like. So before you asked how do you move, or how do you when you can't move? And I think that's the way of coming back to it, like actually returning to my body in whatever means is accessible to me at that time. So whether that's just breath, whether it's like the tiniest movement of dance, like whatever's available to me in that moment, whether it's feeling the dance of wind upon my skin, whether it's being held by nature and being in nature, like she is always telling me that I am perfect as I am. Like, I think one of the other things we touched on before this chat was like the healing power of nature. And for me, that's one of the reasons why, like, go sit in nature, be still, soak it up, and look at what she's teaching us. She has like windswept, ravaged hair. She's messy and she's like, but far out, she's beautiful. Like, let's redefine beauty from inside out. Let's be ravished by wild. Like, that's what I want to feel, not stuck in a box that says I need to have pecs this big. Like,
what are some of the, I know there's classic ones, but I'm always curious to what specific, because it's always surprising. Some people might be like, just the different cultures that we're raised in and that we are around in, you know, in whatever adolescence, in childhood, in adulthood, whatever it might be. And I'll be surprised, like, oh, I've had some people be like, you know, my knees showing or something might have been like, whoa, like, or, you know, like that's such a slut if her knees are showing, or, you know what I mean? Or it's like, if you didn't have, like, I don't know, it's just random things. It might be the shoulders, or it might be if you had like hairy underarm or hairy leg, or if you weren't shaven in the genitals, or all this kind of stuff is like, you know, what were there specific ones that you remember, like, oh, that was a thing and I really didn't want to have that, or wanted to change?
Want to have that. Yeah, hairy legs, hairy armpits, all that jazz. Oh, what else was there? Like, oh, boobs not big enough. That was like, I have petite chest. Which I'm now at peace with, but that was a big thing. Like, oh my God, stomach not flat enough. You know, yeah, just these.
And nowadays it's switched up. Now it's like booty not round enough. Maybe it used to be like booty too big, or, you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
The way the culture shifts and changes, right? And what was your journey like around that? Was it like end of the world? Like, oh, like, was it like you fixated on these things? Because I know I was with my body. I was like, oh, definitely so small. Like, trained all the time, had to eat all the time. Like, I got fixated on it. And what it's like from your perspective.
I think for me, I've come to realize that, so I have a very strong mind, conscious mind, I should say. Like, so I have an extraordinary capacity to hide stuff from myself.
Like the deceit, you mean? Like deceive yourself?
Yeah, in a way. Like, and it's been an ongoing journey. And for me, that's where movement and the body has helped so much to access the stuff that I haven't managed to consciously acknowledge to myself. So in terms of how did that body image stuff affect me? Well, I don't think it was. But then, you know, fast forward to a number of years and layer upon that, like, expectations to do well at school, and then to do well in a career, and then to be the perfect daughter, and then to, like, you know, whatever there might have been. Overachiever who seemingly had all her shit together and was really confident and could connect with people. Underneath all of that, very stressed, like at the level of the physiology of my body. And I guess that's what came to a head.
High cortisol and like like fatigue and that sort of stuff, or?
Well, I guess that's what came to a head once my dad went downhill, which was, you know, it was a pretty big time anyway. So it's sort of understandable in a way. So, you know, on the surface, I was fine, and I convinced myself of that to a great degree. And where we started with
that I was fine, or what was the convincing?
I don't even know I was convincing myself. I guess this is the key, is like, and I know I'm not alone in this, is that we don't know what we don't know at the conscious level. So for all intents and purposes from the outside, I was looking like I was going
you're a bonza. You're a bonza.
Yeah. So, you know, and I was super healthy, seemingly, and going great, running my own businesses, you know, beautiful house that I designed and built with a partner, and, you know, great. And yet, this is why I started out saying, like, our bodies speak what we can't acknowledge, and pain can be a messenger. So even though I was healthy and fit and seemingly happy, I had chronic back pain that cropped up all the time. And I started to have a few little digestive niggles. And when I thought about it, I'd always had a little bit of a nervous tummy. Like these little things which over time, if we don't see the body as a messenger and allow ourselves to actually sit with and feel what it's seeking to communicate, can build. And I mean, the reason for that, like, we're a mind body, a body mind. We're not a mind and a body. We're a mind body. Like, one and the same thing. So
mind is the body. Yeah, that's something that is very apparent as soon as you do any kind of physical practice that's like, or a presence practice where you're using the body as well, you know, like, it's super apparent that, and beyond that as well, bringing it back to nature, is that the body mind, we are all nature as well, you know. So it's like, when you match all of those three, and it's that real felt experience, and that's why I always come back to mindfulness, always come back to presence, because without that, then that's when everything can go to shit. When you're not present, when you're not, you know, if you can't be present, you can't know what's going on, essentially. You know, if you can't pay attention, then all of those things those niggles turn into, you know, that's that idea of just a little millimeter each day, but over time, you know, if it's going to negative, like in the negative way, it's going to be massive problem. But also in the other way as well, a millimeter of just like a little bit of your posture, a little bit up, you know, a little bit smile on the face, a little bit one positive, you know, floss one tooth, just a little action, you know, like, is going to build in the positive way as well.
So true. So true. And I guess, like, one thing that just made me think of is that awareness. Like, yeah, far out, so powerful. And yet that's not something that all of us are lucky enough to have passed on to us. Like, it's innate in all of us, and yet it's not always nourished.
Almost gets bred out with this,
yeah.
especially with so much these days. It's almost everybody's job to try to get your attention. You know, to try to take your attention away from the moment, or away from whatever it is you're up to. You know, it's like, hey, look over here, look over here, look over here. It's like, whoa. Especially if you go to a city or jump online, there's advertising, you know, like going to a mall or something, that's like, whoa. You're just like, all these stuff trying to get my attention, and you're surrounded by it a lot of the time. Especially if you don't take the amount of people I've met who've, like, I'm like, when's the last time you went just for a drive, or, you know, went camping, or, you know, they're like, what? Like, maybe like, oh, I went a few years ago, or like, oh, I went once last year, or, you know, it's just like, whoa. So you're getting bombarded all the time, you know, like, and to have like a moment of mindfulness or presence for that, it's like, whoa, it's a massive breakthrough. Like, to like, whoa, like, so much is going on in my mind right now. So much is actually happening, and I can't shut it off. Or there's so many people with insomnia and this kind of stuff, or anxiety. And, you know, I think it was Japan. I think it's, you can be prescribed like a forest walk if you go to the doctor.
So
like,
good.
And there's another place, I don't know where it is, but I don't know what state. It might be in Australia, where you can get prescribed a walk, like maybe Sweden or something, a walk with a dog. Like,
a walk with a dog, I love it.
It's like, you know, this is kind of like, you go to a doctor and they will prescribe you this. Like, they won't give you a pill.
Germany is amazing for that. Like, they prescribe, the doctor will write out things saying that you are to go auf Kur, which means you're going on cure. And then you go to a wellness center, retreat place, and it's paid for with their, you know, social democratic country, and they all pay into that through their, you know, their earnings regularly. Yeah, so you get prescribed to go for a week-long cure.
Heck yeah, that's what's up. And seeing the like, just to bring it all back together, like, for you, the reason I was talking about nature was because we were talking recently, like, you know, about living in city, and like, yeah, I can't do Melbourne, and, you know, like, what is it for you, like, is it a feeling that you get when you get into a city that you don't like, or is it something that you really love when you're not in the city? Or like, yeah, what do you get from being with nature, or, you know, being surrounded by not city, you know?
Oh, it's and this links to the thing that what you said before prompted for me. belonging.
Mm.
Like, as you mentioned before, like mind, body is the one thing. And that's all a part of nature, like mind, body, nature. It's actually all the one thing. And yet there's so much plastering over that truth. Like, and when we go into nature, or when I go into nature anyway, I find my place within the greater dance, the greater song of life. And I feel my belonging. I feel my part in something greater. And that is such a sense of peace. And, you know, I'm so sad for people who don't have that at their fingertips. And yet there's ways that we can touch on that in cities too, 100%. And I mean, that makes me think of, we were chatting about awareness and the magic of just a moment of mindfulness and sort of touching in with yourself.
Mm.
And again, I also think it's important to acknowledge that depending on the life experiences of someone and how supported they feel or who's around them, that can be really damn scary. Like if there's lots below the surface. So this notion of community, like, yes, mindfulness in ourselves, do we have that place of belonging and community where we can start to open to more and more awareness of the parts of us, including the bits that hurt, the amazing joy, like the full spectrum of my amazing experience as a human being. And
what do you say? Go on.
Yeah, and nature helps me with that too, as well as, you know.
Oh, as in you don't necessarily need the physical human community when you're in nature. Is that what you mean?
I need both. And I need both.
Because that's like, have you spent much time in nature, like just by yourself for like extended periods of time? Like, and if so, how long, and what was the experiences like?
Not enormously extended. So like a night is the longest that I've done on my own.
Mm. Or like with one other, or?
Yeah, with one other, there've been, multi-day hikes and that sort of thing.
Mm. And what's that like? Is that in terms of, because it's not necessarily a community, like a lot of people, or like, but you've got one other. I've been with one other and just been like wandering around for days, and kind of like we're just there together, but we're not necessarily interacting too much, like we're just kind of in our own world. And that for me is, especially in wide open, vast kind of spaces, or like where there's lots of like just a vast, like there's all nature, there's no, you can't see buildings and things, what I mean? It's just like pure nature. Yep. And for me, the experience, it's coming out of that just felt like that deepening into the understanding and the knowing that I am nature. There's no difference between me and nature, and I don't even know what this means, but it's like, this idea of putting things into perspective, like they're just like, oh, it puts me into perspective. You look up at those stars, fuck, how insignificant, yet how significant that I'm actually able to experience all of this, and yeah, it's just like the idea, any idea of separation gets melted away, or any idea of that. It's almost like, it's like the balance point between, well, it's all kind of unimportant because how small we all are, or it all is, yet at the same time it blows my mind that it can be at all, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Like, yeah, there's this relief in recognizing that perspective, as you say, like all this babble going on, like, whoa, but how much does this actually mean? And I'm a part of this miraculous co-arising miracle called life. Like, holy fuck.
Right. And that's how I wake up every day, like whether I'm in the city or not. So like, I'm curious to know, because I haven't spent heaps of time. I was born in Jamaica in nature, I was all surrounded by nature, and I haven't spent I've spent most of my life in cities, and I've spent a lot of my life practicing mindfulness as well. So, and I don't know if that's allowed me to, it's all helped me to manage being around lots of people, or, you know, and I've go through fluctuations around, you know, sometimes I love being around people. Sometimes I don't want to be around anybody. And I don't necessarily get this kind of hunger to be with nature. I just feel like no matter where I am, because I'm on earth, I don't know, that it feels like I am, or I am nature. So it feels, or I'm accessing the moment a lot. So it feels like there's not necessarily a pull for it. I don't know necessarily why it is. But I'm curious for you, what's your experience like? Because I know actually when I do spend time away from cities and then come in, I can definitely feel in my field, I can feel the noise. I can feel
That's what it's
I can feel the electricity. I can feel it, but
like. Yeah.
it's not necessarily, a lot of people can feel it and they go, oh, I don't like it. Well, I'm just like, oh, it is. And then I kind of just go in, you know? So I'm curious to know, for you, is it like, oh, you can just have that silence, or what is it? What's the appeal for you of staying away from cities?
I guess it's just a choice. Like, I do sense when I go into the city, like, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of stuff going on. And yeah, it's just like I guess it's an honoring of what brings me joy. Like, for me, it's being out in wide open spaces, nature. Like, that's my joy. It's like, dance is my joy. That's my joy. Why am I not going to make more space for that in my life? And some people love the different aliveness that exists in a city. So, you know, that's their joy.
Like a petri dish, right?
Yeah. So for me, it's just like a homecoming. And I've valued the times that I have lived in cities, which is not masses of time. Like, many juncture points in my life have chosen between city, country to go for somewhere closer to nature. And I value those times that I lived in the city, because what I experienced there was me having to make peace with, I guess, some of the different aspects of humanity. And our different ways of inhabiting the earth. So that was good for me, I'd say. And having experienced that, I still came back to choosing, I'm a country girl. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely it's never been a like, I've never been into like those vast expanses of nature and those wide open spaces and not felt good. Like, I've never had a bad experience, you know. So, and getting into bouldering now, it's gonna, you know, it's a lot more gonna be, you know, outdoors and just, you know, being with nature and like climbing up things and around things and whatnot. So, like, definitely something I feel like moving more towards. And I guess we're lucky in a lot of there's hardly anywhere in the world necessarily that you can go, especially in this country, in Australia, where you're anywhere more than an hour or two away from beautiful nature. You know, it's like, no matter what city you go, it's pretty much in pretty luscious area, you know.
Yeah, we're really lucky here.
Never deprived of it, you know.
Yeah. I think maybe part of it, like, it's, you know, one of the things that I'm starting to do more of is to take groups of women into nature to do mindfulness and, you know, sensory-based movement stuff in nature, and then to sit in circle and talk with one another. So it's all the pieces we've been talking about. It's my medicine. It's what I need in my life to be whole and to feel nourished, is movement, connection, creativity, and nature. So that's my medicine. That's what I need. So that's what I'm offering in the world. And I think I really would wish for everyone that they do have chances to spend time in nature where it's not just to acquire some peak but just to be in nature. Because, as you said, we are nature, and there's so much wisdom to be learnt from just sitting in and observing nature, and that taps us into our own innate wisdom, and I think uncomplicates things as humans, I believe we have a tendency to think we know everything, or that we need to know everything. We do not know everything, and nor do we need to know everything.
Yeah.
And also a tendency to think that we need to fix everything. This goes back to where we started with pain and illness or whatever. You know, when we look at a global level at what's happening politically, economically, socially, there's a lot that is dying.
Yeah.
And understandably, many of us, and I'm no different, we want to fix it. We don't want it to die.
Yeah.
And yet nature teaches us that everything has its time. And sometimes we need to let things die rather than continually seeking to patch and fix, and then discover that our effort to patch the net actually created a bigger hole.
Right.
And nature sows that wisdom in us, or helps us to hear what's already in us. I'm really passionate about it, as you can tell.
And get like so much has come up for me as you were talking. I'm trying to like catch my thoughts as they arise that get triggered by your words and your sharing, and so much comes up. It unravels. There's these just loops that open up in my mind like fractals, like you can see. And I'm like, all right, cool. There's one. The pieces that have come up from that are like, all right, what are the specifics that you actually out there in nature doing with these women, so that help you to observe? Like I've heard of some, you know, just watching like an ant do its thing, or being fully present with that, or just watching you know, the way the trees move. Like what are some specifics that you get to the women that you're working with doing?
Exactly that sort of thing. And even simply, you know, doing a sensory awareness scan, like stand in nature and then just give yourself a moment to touch in with each of your senses. And
so give us an example of that. What does that look like?
So that might look
someone
like,
listening wants to go do it.
Yeah, so that might look like, you know, find a place in nature and just stand. Standing's quite nice. You can sit if, you know, you don't feel like you're going to be eaten by bugs. So just find a place to stand. Closing your eyes down to start is really nice. And simply beginning first by feeling your feet on the earth, your ground, your weight meeting the earth, and really exploring like each of the corners or the parts of your feet, like actually engage with and imagine. Part of it needs to be visualization at first. Sometimes you mightn't feel.
Shoes off for sure.
Hey?
But shoes off.
Shoes off, again, if you feel okay with shoes off. Like even shoes on, it's okay. But shoes off is prime in my world if you're cool with that. Depends where you are, of course. Yeah. And then just doing a little scan of how your body, you know, stacks up. Your legs, your pelvis, your spine, like just finding your place in space. And from there, just running through the senses. So first connect with sound. And just allowing yourself to be held in the sounds around you and stretching your sense of sound as far as it can go. So just being with the sounds around you. And then you might switch to touch. So feeling, maybe there's wind on your skin, maybe there's sunlight, maybe there's a cold patch, part of you's in the shade. Maybe you suddenly become conscious of the way your clothing caresses your skin. And then maybe you become aware of the way the wind meets your nose and is doing a dance with your internal organs. Like it can actually become amazingly sensual, just fully tuning into touch while you're standing still in nature. And then you could cycle through to smell and taste. Maybe there's a taste there. And then finally, can open your eyes and explore sight. And yeah, I invite people to give it a go. And like, I'd be stoked if they were to, you know, feed back to you what it's like for them. And you can do this in a park in the city or in your backyard. 100%. It totally gives you a taste of that. You don't have to be way out in the wilderness. But that can bring us back not only into our bodies, but our connection with, as you say, like the flow of life all around us in a really beautiful way. And once we're there, we have these realizations just...
Oh, 100%. They just drop in, right?
They just drop in, yeah.
When you're still, and standing has something, really magical about it, you know, and thanks for sharing that. Just to, you know, that's really useful stuff. And that's, I'm big on that. I'm big on like, concepts, principles, like I love universal laws and principles, but I'm like, how can we use it? Like practically, what does it look like? Especially if, you know, it's just nice to be reminded. We might know these things, but all right, cool. I always like to challenge people to go get up and do the thing. Like you might hear you might listen to this podcast in your car, in your, wherever you might be, in your bed, in wherever you might be. And it's like, well, you know, schedule this stuff in, really make time for it. Do one thing a week, you know, 50 things that you've picked up is incredible. Like over the course of a year, you know, like it's like super duper. Like for me, it's like action, you know, it's really like that young energy, you know, that's like masculine, but I'm like, do it, implement it, bring it down to
totally, 100%
life, you know. And that movement is something that is, like you said, it's almost that stillness. And I don't believe there's ever stillness ever, really. Like if you're still enough, you realize nothing is ever still. The heart's beating, there's blood coursing through your veins, there's rivers of blood gushing through your arteries, and you know, there's cells that are dividing, and you know, like there's never stillness, you know. But there is almost a stillness of like, well, there's an observation space that happens, you know, and that is kind of constant, you know. And that space, I believe, I don't know what happens, but it's like it develops that trust in yourself, that ability to go, oh, actually, that voice inside is guiding me towards something beneficial for me. It allows, for me anyway, to discern between the voices out there and the voice that is inside that is beneficial. You know, there's voices that go, I'm a shit, I'm terrible, I need the thing that is going to be like, give me a short-term high or whatever it is, or give me the dopamine that I'm looking for. And that, you know, and then that voice, I might like be confused by which one it is. And then I feel the stillness develops a trust in the inner voice that is for life or pro-life or for me and for creating the intention, you know. That's sort of my experience of it, you know.
Yeah, I love that articulation. So that inner voice, that inner guidance system that's always there.
And that's feeling. What specifically was the message for you around the illness, or the, you know, like, what was it asking you, or what was it telling you, or what was the communication?
I don't know if there was one.
Like, was there a point where there was a definite, all right, I had a sore shoulder, I had a sore neck, or I had a sore spine, or whatever, finger, whatever it might have been, where that was specifically telling you a specific one?
I mean, one example, two points there. I think for me, the body stuff has just been like, that just happened to be my initiation. Like that helped me to get clear on my purpose. And, you know, I don't know, I'd love to know, you know, what have been the challenge points in your life that have honed your clarity around your purpose. Like, I think we all have them. And that was one for me. And then I think, you know, there is a certain, with each thing that comes up in my body, I'm beginning to get familiar with what the pattern might be that I've looped into. For instance, my back, that generally crops up if I'm making myself do something that is actually not authentically what I feel called to do. So if I'm straying from what actually feels like my calling and my purpose because of these notions of expectations or what I should do, or, you know, then the back might have a little wobble. Which generally is, you know, if I've cycled to a point where I haven't been doing enough of the, you know, the regular come back to that inner voice. Or if there's just been other, you know, as I mentioned, sometimes, again, I don't like to make wrong the experiences that arise. So that notion of like each of us is always growing and expanding, you know, we get to a point and then the shell that once served us, we need to crack through that. And each of those little expansion points can be a little bit uncomfortable. And I think sometimes there can be a hesitancy or a resistance to go, okay, we're doing this again. And I think maybe when I hit those points, that often shows up in the body. And I think I used to be like, oh my God, what's going on? The world's ending. Whereas now I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on here? I need to like tune in even deeper now. Like rather than thinking that the world's ending.
Hone in that listening ability, that ting energy, that ability to be aware of what it is and the subtleties of the communication, right? And we talked about innate wisdom, you know, that innate wisdom. I feel that that's kind of a sub communication of everything we've been chatting about thus far. It's like understanding that we are nature, like being with nature and in nature is like straight plug in to that idea and that concept in an embodied way. And that plug, which is like the plug of direct source power coming through you, and that is that innate wisdom that comes through from that. You know, it's almost like, all right, cool, well, I just have access to that a lot when you know, maybe if I was living in nature more, I wouldn't have to meditate so much, you know. You know what I mean? Like possibly, definitely.
Oh, this pops another thing into my mind. Having a conversation with another friend recently about meditation, and you know how when we enter that space of stillness, like that can bring through creativity, insight, like the capacity to manifest, or to use a different word, create what we want to in life. Like that's that creation point. And yet she's like, but you don't seem to meditate that much, but you seem so good at like just getting shit happening in your life. Like, how do you do it? And I was like, well, not all of my meditation is sitting meditation. And I think that's a nice thing for people to know, because often people are like, they say to me, oh, I can't meditate. I can't do meditation. I'm like, it's cool. Don't stress. Like you can begin to explore that through movement. It's another reason why I love dance. Like I can drop straight into what is a meditative state through movement and dance. What's it like for you with Qigong?
Same deal. For me, it's breath. Like it's just like breath is the dance. And for me, becoming more and more with the breath, it's becoming life is the dance. Life is the practice, you know. So it's even like to a level of thought, you know, like the movement of the thought. And it's almost like tapping into that point of, it's balancing the stillness in the movement. It almost keeps coming back to that. It's like without stillness, you can't have movement.
Yeah.
Right? Without light, you can't have dark. It's like that point there. It's like you can't understand movement without stillness. It doesn't make sense. Right?
Totally. Yeah, that yin and yang. It's actually another really beautiful exercise to do. I suspect that many of your listeners are very embodied people anyway, but even for someone who moves a lot, it can be fun to just go back to something like this, like lying on the floor and like super gentle, small movement, or crawling, making a little movement and then yielding and finding stillness, and exploring like subtle movement and then stillness, and just noticing it's amazing what you can discover about your comfort with movement and or stillness, or it's really simplest of exercises.
Yeah, I find that's a a lot of people, even myself included, definitely myself included, being ectomorphic in the body, and it's one of the traits, and being a little bit hyperactive, and is the ability or the idea to sit still, to be still. Like, whether I've seen some people, like, maybe always got like a, like the leg moving or tapping or something, flicking a pen or just something fidgeting, like. And for me, that's like, all right, cool. Let's just still, because like you said, the body mind, it's like, oh, I can't sleep, or there's all these ailments, whatever they might be, anxiety, insomnia, being stressed, just basic, kind of ailments. And just find that coming into stillness can just alleviate so much of that. It's like a still body. When I stand still, the mind just starts becoming still. Or if the breath is like here and sharp and short, just deepening the breath or softening the breath or being aware of the breath, letting it go into its natural flow, immediately it's like, oh, the mind starts becoming still. It's like, it's not so crazy, or it's not so noisy.
Yeah.
And
in the same breath, like what we were just talking about, sometimes that stillness does have to come through lots of movement, and that's okay as well. Like knowing our natural inclination.
Find that point, that following your bliss point as well. It's like that innate wisdom will communicate what it is. It's like it's like, I don't know what to do, or this seeking, or this, it's like, well, oftentimes just simply asking the question, what do I want? Like, people don't ask themselves. Myself, I didn't ask myself that for years. Like, what do I want? What would I like to create? And people like this, that, complain, whatever, or there's pain or whatever. So, well, what would I like to experience? What would I like to create? What do
How
I
do I want to feel?
How do I want to feel? How do I would like other people to feel? Like, what's my intention? Like, these questions I find super powerful. And just to skip and sort of, I like doing this where I'll just be like, oh, there was another thing that we talked about ages ago. I'll just bring it back up. And that was the idea of, nature having its cycles, and things having to die, and things having to, run their course, and not having to fix everything. That I was just talking about this, I think it was yesterday or the day before, where it was on Facebook Live. It was my brother's birthday 3 days ago, sorry, on Tuesday, and he would have been 28. And I was remembering when he died, literally the day he died, and from that point on, I was at his service, which was like the biggest party ever, by the way. If anyone was there, freaking awesome. It was like the best celebration, proper music, dance, colorful, like it was just amazing. And almost want to share this. Just like, when you share a story, often you like, everyone has heard it, but obviously not everyone has heard it. So, but when I was there, not anyone actually. There was 5 or 6 speakers, family, friends who spoke, and not one of them mentioned the nature of the death, which was from depression, and it was, he took his own life. No one was like, let's not talk about it. And I was like, they're going, he's for real? And the next person, surely this person can say, not. All right, I was almost getting angry. I was like, what the fuck? We're seriously going to play this game? Nobody's going to say that about the nature of the death. So I was like, look, this is what happens. And I was like, I don't know what the communication was. I was highly emotional, but it was like, I'm appalled that none of you would mention this, because this is so important that you can't just sweep it under the carpet or not talk about it. And it was just like, anybody who is ever feeling like not okay, just reach out and tell someone, or like, call me, or like, like this, you don't need to go to this kind of lengths to, when you're dealing with these, these things that are normal, that all of us experience, and the point being was, when I remember making a commitment on the day he died. I was like, every single thought, every single action, everything I do in this world is dedicated to his life, and to really owning and really owning life and really going, I am alive and I'm gonna fucking live it, right? And and obviously over the years, I'm like imperfect, perfectly imperfect, and that fluctuates. That commitment to that idea of everything is dedicated, still is, but it's not like I'm living that 100%. And I was remembering it, going fuck, and that has just sparked me. Just remembering that has sparked this over the past few days. I've just life has been so miraculous and magical to another level which I've experienced before. And I know we were talking about, death being an invitation to live, and to life. And it is a beautiful thing when we look at it. We're like, oh, it's dying, it's sad, it's crumbling, it's grief. It's like, yeah, but everything is two-sided, right? Everything is multidimensional, and there's not just one-sided to it. So yeah, I that is really relevant. Like we were talking about this being like an exciting kind of subject, and especially you with dad, and it's like, well, yeah, it's like going through that stuff. I know, I'm curious to know what it's, have you had any moments like that where you're like, all right, I'm dedicated, or like where this death has caused beauty, or like that dying off has caused a blossoming and a blooming of other aspects, or in other areas of life. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of jam on that a little bit, that idea.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And oh my goodness. So I was going to ask you the question, like, what do you feel your brother offered you? Like, but you've answered it anyway. Like, oh my goodness. Like, wow.
Well, I can quickly answer it quickly. Like,
yeah, if there's more, please.
A big one with grief, that was a massive lesson in grief and what grief is and how one can navigate grief. Because I lost my best friend 4 years prior in exactly the same way, jumped in front of a train, right? And my grief response to grief that time was just to go in a downward spiral and to go totally one-sided. This is a shit thing, and I couldn't see any benefit in it, and I just wanted to escape from the pain of it. And I learned that's what not to do when it comes to grief. I learned that's not how to deal with it. But then also that downward spiral led me to, like, I did have one commitment to music, and that sort of led me to meeting my partner, and we had children, and that was the beauty from it afterwards, right? So this time when with my brother, I really just wanted to understand grief and what is this idea of loss, and what does it mean, and I really understood the point. We always hear like there's a silver lining to everything. There's when one door closes, another door opens. It's great to have it in theory, but what does it look like? What does it embodied feel like? And that's the key, the piece that I really got from that. You said, what did he give me? Well, he gave me the understanding that nothing in the world is one-sided, only one-sided. Every single thing is multidimensional and isn't capable of being unless it has the equal and opposite, and that understanding I felt on a visceral sense when he passed, this concept of when we have energy, it can't just be created or destroyed. It has to just change form, right? It's like, it's the thermodynamics, right? It's like, and that on that level as well, where that essence of the person goes back into everything. And I viscerally felt his essence come back into the whole, which we all are, right? And yeah, so that gave me a real felt embodied understanding and knowing deeply of that, so that's definitely what he gave me. There's a whole bunch of other things that he gave me, but I understood fully, like he was my training partner, he was an inspiration, I got to be a teacher with him, I got to learn from him, all of these things, but also I understood that none of that is missing. I'm getting all of that from other areas of my life, whether I choose to believe it or see it or not. And that was the most massive thing that I received there.
Wow. And I feel like, has that infused you with greater courage in your capacity to step forward in life in other ways now?
For sure. It's allowed me to have deeper, I would say first and foremost, deeper understanding deeper, it's like, yeah, deeper understanding of like life itself and acceptance. More like the courage is like, is a piece. However, probably the understanding and the acceptance and the core experience of love, like actually feeling, because for me, love is just an understanding that everything it is like, we are all of it, you know, and life, it's like every single thing, good, bad, ugly, I am that, you know, and owning that and fully accepting that there's nothing out there that isn't me, that I am not. So really understanding and accepting all of myself. So it's like, I guess the more aligned I am with that and with myself and with all of me, which is all of everything, the courage is like a byproduct, you know?
Totally. This has been beautiful to listen to. I think it's tapped into like one of the things that inspires me to kind of do the sort of stuff I like to do, and that is hopefully creating spaces or experiences where people feel they can be and bring them their whole selves. So whether that's in nature or whether that's on a dance floor, it's like, as you said, like that, yeah, that's so freaking healing. That's, yeah. And I've got another question for you. that grief journey, like what did that look like, or what was that for you?
Well, essentially it was me, I'd actualized somehow, like created, can't even remember how it happened, but it was like 2 weeks after his death. I was like at a Dr. John D. Martini event in Brisbane. And yeah, I was picked up from the state, from 500 people in the audience, to be on stage with him and do the grief process, which he runs through.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was like on stage journeying that, and there was a bunch of pieces like for the few weeks after his death, like maybe up to 6 weeks after, that would just kept bringing me back into the heart and kept showing me that there's nothing that's one-sided. That kept showing me that, you know, that life is shades of gray, you know, and it's neither black nor white. And it was just kept showing me, and it was like, okay, cool, I get it, and just allowed me to embody it. So, and it also looked like me holding that idea and that concept that there is, that every experience that we have in life is an opportunity, or it contains an opportunity, you know, especially the hard times or the challenging times or the crises. They all contain blessings. They all contain, you know, each challenge creates support. Each crisis contains a blessing or an opportunity. But it's really easy to see just the challenge or just the stress or just the pain, or just, you know, it's really easy to just focus on that. But it's not always, kind of, it takes a little bit of effort to go, hang on, where is the opportunity in this? And just having that quick question, oh, what is this showing me? What is this teaching me? What is useful about this? What's the opposite side of this? It's just a quick little question. And holding that space for people really allowed me to deepen into it myself. Like similarly with teaching, you know, or, you know, being a coach, being someone who's facilitating, being someone who's running something and is to deliver a piece, a principle, a technique, or something, to, you know, a piece of knowledge that they don't have or someone else doesn't have but would like to experience. You know, it really puts you in a place or a state where you have to embody the thing and have to know it at least a little bit more than the person you're leading, right? And so that, you know, holding that space for others and just teaching, you know, other people that is a possibility as well. That's kind of what it looked like as well, holding space for a lot of people to go, hey, it ain't so bad. What's good about this? You know, it's not just bad. What else? You know, what else is come from it? Well, where have you won? Oh, oftentimes people can't see it, and it's like, well, you can. It is there. Trust me, if you look hard enough, you know.
Yeah, sit with it. It's so true. Yeah, it's that little balance point, hey, isn't it? Like, yeah, it's always there though. It is always there. It's like, And that thing of that pushback you can get when you, if you ask the question and someone's like, I'm not there yet.
It's all shit. So bad. So terrible.
Let me stay here a bit longer. Yeah.
Back to the question, what would your invitation to life look like from your experiences with death or decay or loss?
Death or decay? I'm just going to riff with the first thing that just popped into my mind, because it's something that we kind of touched on briefly earlier.
Love it. The random.
Random. I'm just going to, whatever just plopped in there, again, like so much. I think the themes that you just articulated ring very true for me as well, in terms of what Dad dying offered me. And then a sort of slightly different trajectory. I don't have children. I haven't had children. And for me, journeying with my dad as he died, I feel like that was my initiation into womanhood. Before that, yeah, I was still very much in the maiden phase of my life. I hadn't been weathered by life. I hadn't, it was, so I honestly, it felt like an initiation. And as I speak of this, like the imagery that's running through my head is like of, the crevices of earth that have been worn with wind and water over the years, and that wild and and allowing myself to be worn by life rather than seeking to try and retain, like we come back to that perfection that we were talking about, like, no, let life have me. Let life wear me down. Let me be marked by life. Let me feel my humble human heart. That is all. So yeah, I think that was a unique gift for me in my dad's dying. Yeah, and oddly enough, like we touched on before, that while he was sick, like I stopped menstruating for 1.5 years. And to go back further, from when I first started menstruating as a teenager, had always had an irregular cycle.
What does that look like? Is it like sometimes it's 28 days, sometimes it's 21 days? Like, how does it look like?
Way more random than that. So from 3 weeks to 3 months. At one point it was 8 months. Like,
and that was your normal? Like, what was the conversation around it? Kind of like open, discussed, or?
That's what others told me, and yet I didn't feel like it was my normal. But within, let's call it the modern medical system or the standard medical system, there wasn't anyone willing to listen long enough to say, okay, what feels like is going on for you? Instead, I was given the contraceptive pill to regulate a cycle that, to suppress a cycle that was already, a little bit hit and miss. So I felt like I was banging my head against a brick wall. And having, my journey is very much tied with psychosomatic linkages, like between what shows up in our body. And for a number of years, it was like a deep dive into like, what does it mean for me to be a woman? And I discovered a lot of ways in which I was literally pushing away my femininity and what it is to be a woman. And there's lots to that, like myriad of things. In some ways, not feeling that it was safe to be. In other ways, maybe feeling some sense of shame or guilt around my body and my form as a woman. Fearing the power inherent in what it is to fully claim what it is to be a woman. And, you know, my mum is amazing. I love her. And I had other wonderful women in my family, and yet I didn't have someone in my immediate life who was able to model to me what it looks like or is to be a woman who can be soft in her strength. And I can see now on reflection that part of that was about, you know, I happen to come from a lineage of women who they kind of had to inhabit their Amazon woman, their get shit done woman, or they felt they had to. Let me rephrase that. For whatever reason, that was what they felt, and that was the belief they had.
Mm.
And so as a result, there was like this bit of me that was like, I don't want to have to be hard like that. And yet then at a, you know, media sort of cultural level, there was this other part of me that was like, and nor do I want to, you know, wear reams of makeup and be like, oh, woe with me, come save me, you know, like, I was like, that's not it either. Like, what does womanhood look like or feel like in a way that I'm okay to inhabit? And it was through dance that I first began to experience that, through conscious dance.
What was the intro to that? Like, how did that come into you?
For me, that was, for people who don't know it, conscious dance is free-form, unchoreographed dance. And there are many different, let's call it schools. There's 5 rhythms, there's dancing freedom, there's soul motion, there's open floor. So there's many different versions of conscious dance. But in essence, each of them is an invitation to let the body lead. And again, remind body. So it's still the mind and the body, but by giving permission to just let the body move and lead, by giving permission to move differently in the world, we are rewriting who we are. So when I allow myself to move differently, I am different.
Mm.
So through that free-form movement, I can begin to note the movements that feel risky or sticky, and then I can explore that safely on a dance floor. Oh, what do I recognize about the beliefs or the stories or the things or you know, 5 rhythms, and most of these dances, you go through a wave form. So you start kind of mellow, and then you'll kind of go into a bit of chaotic movement and motion, and then you'll come to a place of stillness through movement. And for me, that was my first taste of sensing what it is to allow a flow that has just this power in it. And for me, it was first touched upon when I was like exploring the element of water in my own movement. And I was like, whoa, like this chisels mountains over time. And I was like, wow, I'm finally understanding what a version of the feminine is that I'm comfortable with. And of course, men and women can do this. So, you know, for both of us, we can learn about those feminine and masculine dynamics within each of us through movement and dance. And so it started to shift with that dance. And then
so that the cycles started to become regular. Like, what was happening with the menstruation around the time you said it started shifting? Is that what you're talking about?
No, my concept of femininity started shifting. It was still all over the place for a long time.
It's more of the womanhood. Okay, piece. All right, cool.
Yeah. It wasn't until. Sorry?
That was the beginning of your initiation into what the femininity, what woman is, in your idea of what, you know, something that you get to choose and you get to define, right?
And yeah, I think that continued then through, you know, my dad's diagnosis with terminal illness at a time where I just completely turned my own life upside down and moved to Canada and was like, you know, had let go of all the old identities and labels.
I'm out.
Exactly. I hit that point in life.
I'm grown. I'm a grown ass woman now. I'm doing it. I'm out.
And then Dad's diagnosis happened, And so then that morphed into an exploration of those life and death dynamics that you were talking about, which for me, and as you've articulated too, is like intimately intertwined with nature. And yeah, the cycles of life and death, and yeah, all the themes that we've been talking about. And it culminated with my time spent with Dad as he died. And it's not until after Dad died, a little while after, that I finally began menstruating regularly. So and to me it's, yeah, it was.
So that was the first time ever in your life that you've been menstruating regularly. And is it like on point? Is it like 28 days? Is it always?
It was with the full moon, and I now think that I'm flipping to the new moon.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's like, is that something that you've journeyed with specifically? You've seen particular people around who I don't know, do coaching around it or have education around it? And yeah, if so, like what does that look like? What's your journey around that look like? Something I get to experience much is like that women's business stuff, and I've oftentimes I'll talk about this stuff, and women will be like, "That's women's business. You don't need to know about it." And I'm like, "Well, I'm human as well," you know, like.
Oh gosh, and I'm so grateful for the questions, and I actually feel like thank you for asking. And I guess that's part of the shame thing that can also happen too. Like it's extraordinary the level of shame I had around bleeding for years. I was with a partner for 10 years and I still sought to hide it from him when I had my period. Like, what the? And yet now recognizing the more aware I can be of my cycle as a woman and the seasons that I inhabit through that and the way that impacts me, the more I can communicate that with the men in my life in a way that means that they don't have to be as like, whoa, what is going on with her right now? Like, if I can know, like, oh, week 3 of my cycle, I have a little moment where I think the world is ending. Like, okay, like, but if I know that, then I don't have to go into a spin about it. I can be like, oh, okay, it's just that little moment of doubt that I might sometimes have at that point in my cycle, and I don't. Or if I know that I need more time on my own when I'm bleeding, then I can ask that of the people in my life. Or so I'd be interested in your perspective. Like, how do you find it as a man? Like, is that a nice thing if a woman can?
For me, it's useful. For me, it's useful. Being a man, I find that I'm very practical. You know, I find that can I use this? How do I use it? Where's the logical sequence of things? And it's like, okay, is it useful? Is it beneficial? Is it how I like to help? I like, you know, men like to be like the hero, and you know, we like to be useful in some way. And for me, if it's able to be articulated and able to be communicated, then it becomes, we can manage it, right? And this kind of comes back to that. I like this idea of, rather than having imperfect expectations, you know, it's like, you know, like perfecting our expectation, or we expect people to be perfect or ourselves to be perfect, you know, and rather than doing that, it's like we want to get really good at or perfect our expectations, you know. And I find that this concept is really valuable if someone can understand their own self, that self-awareness, which, you know, all parts of self, including the menstruation. Someone knows their cycle, like you were just talking about, then they can articulate it and communicate it with you. Then it becomes, all right, this is what to expect, you know, during week 1, week 2, week 3, whatever it might be, just so you know. And for me, I like to, you know, if I'm hanging out with someone and we're spending lots of time together, I like to know when is the particular seasons of the cycle. So I'm ovulating here. I'm about to menstruate here. It's like, you know, I'm really find it useful for me, because then I can then manage my own if I'm, because I'm the type of person, so sometimes I'm quite harsh or quite like, just this is the way I'm, like, I'm short or blunt. I don't like to beat around the bush. I'm direct. Sometimes that will be inappropriate. Sometimes I'm going to get my head bitten off, or sometimes it's going to be mean, or you know what I mean? Or other times it'll be like, nah, that's what I need right now. I need that direct blunt. Do you know what I mean? So it really helps me to get perfect with with my expectations as well,
Yeah. And just listening to that from the flip side as well, just that awareness, I guess, even if your usual upfront self and that hits a nerve more with a woman in your life at a particular point in her cycle, like even just the awareness that's the dynamic that just happened means that even for the woman, like, it's then you're like, oh, okay, it's just that thing that happens at that time. Like, we're all cool. Like, it doesn't have to become a bigger thing.
Story. And as well, for the self-regulation, like, oftentimes I'll talk about this stuff. I'm like, so when's your cycle, or what's happening? Like, what, you're interested in that? They'll get that kind of response. It's like, what? Why does that matter to you? Or oftentimes it will be like, well, not really. I don't know. I've never really paid much attention to it, and I don't see what's the point. And if I can see value in it, I might do it. And the ability to self-regulate your own, like, because oftentimes you'll get, during ovulation, for instance, you're going to be flooded with hormones, and during, when you're menstruating, you're going to be having a lack of, your hormones levels are going to be really low. Like, so, you're going to know in your own behavior what is, sometimes you just be totally hallucinating. There's stuff that's going on. You're like delirious or whatever it might be, and like, actually what is reality isn't actually happening. It's this bodily stuff that's going on, and that's okay. So it's like judging anything, but it's like knowing that, then you can, what hand you've got in your hand, so you know how to play it, right?
Yeah. It's really empowering. And you ask sort of people that I'd worked with, very lucky to have, as happens, synchronistically, people just sort of land in your life at the right time. But a few key ones that spring to mind, a friend of mine, Shalina, and if women are wanting to look it up, Rising Woman is the name. She and her very dear friend and sister soul, Heather, head Rising Woman. And yeah, she was very influential.
What are their full names? Selena and who?
Shalina Brakel and Heather Pennell.
Beautiful.
And of Rising Woman. So they're on Insta, Rising Woman, and I think it's risingwoman.com. Awesome. But Google it and I'm sure they'll pop up. And so their work, there's aspects of, exploring our moon cycle, as well as, elements of sort of psychotherapeutic work, but it's about bringing women together to be able to share openly what's going on in life, but some beautiful stuff around communication, honoring our boundaries as women, how to express your needs, all of which, as you would...
There's the rabbit holes here. You just...
I know, and it's all the stuff that I'm passionate about as well, like, and in terms of like with our cycle as well, half of the kind of weird emotional stuff that can crop up, arises from an inability or a discomfort in expressing what we need at that point in our cycle, or what our boundaries are at that point in our cycle. Like, okay, I need quiet time now. Can I actually express that without feeling guilty or whatever, and then trust that I can negotiate that with the people in my life. So then it comes down to like, yeah, I have faith in our capacity to communicate through this. And I also have a background in facilitation and communication. And so that's something that I am very passionate about working with women on as well. And it's been a big part of my journey, like coming to know that, yeah, I have a pretty big part of me that wants to please and be amenable and keep the peace, which is a beautiful gift. As you say, everything, there's no good or bad, everything, and yet knowing that can be a really big part of my personality, my nature. It's like being mindful of that and then strengthening some of the other aspects that can help to balance that out, like the willingness to clearly articulate my needs and my boundaries. which is such a gift to any relationship. So
Every,
Rising Woman, they're phenomenal.
every,
In terms of menstrual cycles specifically, Claire Baker is another one. She's, she runs retreats. She has online courses and stuff, really beautiful work. And, lots of tools for actually tracking your cycle in really easy ways. And it doesn't have to be apps and things. I tried that and it just drove me nuts. Like
technology. This is like natural,
So Claire Baker is another
I'm not
really
a cyborg.
Yeah. And then for me personally, like I can't say enough for the magic of working with plants. And for me, that looked like seeing a naturopath and nutritionist. But, that might be a homeopath, that might be a herbalist of a different nature, a kinesiologist, they're often using flower essences and stuff like that. Working with plants to help in that realm as well is magical. And again, that's...
What kind of plants have you found have been beneficial?
What kind of what? Sorry?
What plants in particular have you found beneficial for you during your journey? Because every body and chemical makeup of every single one of us is going to be different. But for you in particular, what's helped?
Oh my goodness, my naturopath had me on many different mixes that were constantly changing with where I was at.
What's that process look like? Like, it's like, how does the one diagnose or prescribe the particular plant at any particular time? Like, why does it change? Why is it just like you're looking for kind of symptoms? You're looking for some sort of, all right, maybe your tongue is this color, or like you're doing that, or like what happens? Is it a question? Is it muscle testing? What is it?
This is kind of beyond my specific realm of experience and knowledge. That seems like what it is to me. Like, I guess, I use essential oils quite a bit, and I could relate it to that. Is, each plant has an essence and certain qualities to it, and whatever particular power it has, when we work with that plant, it can help us to tap into that within ourselves. So, whether it's herbal remedies or essential oils, or however you're working with a plant, they're helping us to find our homeostasis. So each of those plants have different regenerative capacities, or they have different compounds that help to repel certain things or to attract certain things. And when we work with nature in that way, it's helping us to tap into those same capacities within our body mind system.
Right.
In that, in finding that homeostasis where we're constantly fluctuating, but hopefully it's a bit more like this rather than like this.
I believe that life is like that. It is exactly that. It is when we're children, it's a little bit like this. Adolescence maybe a little bit like this. Trying to adult might be a little bit like this. And then it's like maturity come kind of back to this, get into wisdom, kind of come back down to that, level like it was when we were a child, so that maturity, there is that maturation. And we were talking about this as well, like really gracefully maturing and, really honoring, like, we've got the gray hairs and
Yes.
the wrinkles in the eyes and, and the
Totally.
experiences, that weathering of the physical body, but also the emotional body and the brain, getting more wrinkles literally as we learn more. And yeah, for me, that is exciting, and it's more movement and stretching and stuff is becoming more and more important for me personally. Like I love moving, and I'm like, I can't, not necessarily have the metabolism or the flexibility or just the spring in the step, as I used to. And the older I'm getting, more, it's almost actually, I feel like younger because I'm more dedicated to, because before it's taken for granted. I can do all the things. I can take all the drugs. I can do all the partying. I can take all the junk food, and now I'm like, actually, no, I cannot. If I, and feeling a bit more younger. But yeah, for you, what is that? Yeah, I guess we were talking about that a little bit, but I can't really remember what your experience of it was like.
With the aging,
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Do you know what? I'm going to read what I just thought when you expressed that was like, maybe through our age, we're like invited to learn to honor the vessel more. Like, this heartfelt gratitude for this thing that carries me in this embodied experience of life, which, as you say, then connects us through to the earth and nature. And how can I honor this beautiful entity more? So I think age is an invitation, as death and dying is, for like that weathering and that softening that actually in many ways is opening us to life more.
You're going to read
but yeah, I'm going to read a little thing that I wrote I think it was just after my dad passed away, and I felt weathered. Like I felt very worn by life. And when I looked in the mirror, there was this part of me that was like, yeah, okay, wow, it's happening, like I'm not the spring chicken anymore. And being willing to sit with that face in the mirror and actually see the power that I saw beginning to appear through that. And I wrote this little piece, so I'll read it out. I'd like to talk about this thing called getting older. I'd like to talk about being weathered by life and letting life weather me and stretch me and deepen me. I'd like to talk about looking in the mirror and seeing grey hairs and growing smile lines. Truth carriers, these lines of years lived, people loved, and lessons, sometimes slowly, learned. No shame here, just a softening and a strengthening. Springtime perfection gone, summer burns bright, and permission grows, wisdom grows, voice grows. Woman, at last I feel I am a woman. For some of us it comes through the birth of a child. For me it came through death, the death of a father. Weathered, yes, I have been weathered. I feel ancient earth in me. I feel eons in me. And I'm not ashamed to let others see. Beautiful strength is what I see in the women around me. Soul deep strength earned in heartfelt sighs and the language of giving and loving. Let yourselves be weathered, beautiful sisters. Although I am but beginning to feel the turn of time in me, I suspect there are great treasures and truths upon this path. Don't hide your years, your wisdom, your growth. Let go the notion that you need to look a certain way to be loved and valued. Embrace what life offers, including the getting of grey hair and the gracious strength of age. Take up your place. Teach the younger ones. Listen to the older ones. Know that your beauty flows deep. Love never dies, and joy is a thing that lives in your heart. For all my sister souls and the lines, scars, and grey hairs you hold, thank you for your beautiful strength and courageous truth.
Oh, snap. I forgot you had bars. I forgot you had it like that. I remember you read me something in the past, and I just totally forgot. I didn't know you had that connection like that. Thank you.
I've got reams of it. Reams of it.
Thank you. Definitely gonna have to get you read some more of that. Where can we find some of it? Do you have a blog or something?
Insta's where I post most of it.
Yes to all of that.
Yeah, so
that excites me.
Yay!
Speaking my language, words, it's the best.
So yeah, Uschi Steedman on Insta, which is USCHISTEEDMAN, and my website's the same, usshisteedman.com.
Uschi, what does Uschi mean? It's a dope name.
It's quite different. It's a German name. It's short for Ursula, which is Latin for little female bear.
Little female bear. That's totally, totally relevant, right?
The bear. I do like giving hugs. For some odd reason, I think that's very apt for a bear.
Totally apt. Bear hugging. Awesome. 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 Well, I feel like our time is coming towards an end. This cycle is coming towards an end for our flow. That was like a nice little point to finish off. So thank you so much for sharing it with us. And before we leave, is there anything that is poignant, anything that's coming up for you now, in particular, like for the listeners and the audience who is tuned in? Is there anything that you would like to invite them to? Like oftentimes I'm like, is it a question? Is it something that is just wants to come through for you to communicate now? Like, yeah, is there something that really wants to come through in this moment through you?
I think we've touched on it all, but I think the main message is like, be in your body, trust your body, like with every squeak and creak and like, again, the body mind thing, it's all one, but we've been gifted this sentient experience and it's the gateway to like life. Don't make your body wrong. It's like every cell is like spinning with ancient wisdom, like be in that.
Scientific too. They talk about the Akashic records is something scientific. Like people talk about this Akashic record that every cell, you know, the DNA holds the whole of history in it. You know, it's coded in there, and it's like, and that's not even like this hippie concept. It's a science. You know, so it's like, well, it's also magical. Someone was telling me that science is the most woo-woo thing of all.
Yes.
You know, it's like marrying both of those, you know, and I agree. Like movement, even just moving, like I would invite people, if you love moving and embodiment already, explore that more. But if you're finding yourself sitting in front of a computer, if you find yourself sitting or not moving much, driving everywhere, just at least one day a week, at least an hour a week, at least a little bit, to have a dance and move around, just climb something, play, incorporate play. Like for real though. I have another episode which I would love you to watch. I'm gonna probably link you to it, which I believe you love, and I'd love you to link up with Homeboy on that particular thing. So I just want to thank you for sharing your self and your beautiful words and your perspective. Yeah, you're doing great things in the world, and I really have enjoyed myself, and I look forward to hopefully doing it again sometime.
I would love that, and thank you so much too, Zulu. Just stoked to be here, and yeah, it's just so beautiful that you're creating a space to explore all of this amazingness. There's so much good stuff going on in our world nowadays, and yeah.
Yes, there is.
Love it.
My absolute pleasure. So thanks for tuning in, Flow fam. And until next time, keep the flow growing and the growth flowing.